So the way that this story starts is with an alien invasion. It's not exactly like alien invasions you see in the movies, but it's sort of close. This story follows a fellow who lives through this, whose name is Max Weber. He's in his 20s, and he was going to college on the West Coast when the aliens attacked and just began blowing everything up. And he went into hiding. He had managed to get out to the Midwest and was hiding in a tornado shelter with some people, and then there were some difficulties there, and so he left and he began just traveling across the United States. There was a lot of fighting that he had to avoid for a while. Another problem that came up was that because the aliens came down, there started to arise diseases that we'd never seen before that began wiping out whole towns, and so people started avoiding each other. So he didn't talk to anyone for about a month once he started realizing that, avoiding any dead bodies he found. He found a lot of abandoned tanks, a lot of abandoned cars, houses. He didn't find a lot of alien bodies. He found some abandoned walkers that they had. One of the machines that they would use are these two-legged walkers, almost out of Star Wars. Things begin to kind of entropy. He doesn't see anybody. He's trying to avoid getting caught with a disease, and finally he comes back to the East Coast, which is where he had originally lived, and he starts looking around for his hometown, and he finds it. There's nobody around. The whole place is silent. He goes walking down this road back towards his house, and he kind of curves through sort of this wooded area, and he doesn't see anybody. He sees a raccoon in daylight, so he figures it might be rabbit or something, but it runs away from him. He doesn't see any birds. He doesn't hear anything. It's sort of overcast. He turns the one corner onto Arlington Street, which is the street that he lived on, and he goes up a hill, and it curves around and it comes to a cul-de-sac. And in the cul-de-sac there's still lying there on the ground now the basketball hoop and that they used to play with when they were kids. And he sees that the house to the right in the cul-de-sac, where an old man used to live, the roof's been smashed open. There's some damage throughout the whole neighborhood that he's seen, but actually not as much as you would think. There didn't seem to be as much fighting here. It looks as though people abandoned the area when the disease started to get out of hand and they heard about the aliens coming. But there is some damage, like the one fellow's roof. He looks over to the left. There was an old lady who lived in a house that there was a driveway that would go down this hill and would curve around into the deeper woods, and you'd get to her house, and her car is still there, and he's pretty sure that she's probably dead inside, or someone else picked her up. And then there's his house, which is down a long driveway through kind of a field, just a small, about an acre of land. It hasn't been mowed for a while. It's been months since the aliens first came, so it's kind of overgrown. So he walks down his driveway, and the car, one of the cars is still there. The other car is missing. It's a silver Corolla, and so he passes by that, and he goes up to the house, and it seems to be in pretty good condition. The door is locked, and he doesn't have his key, so he looks around the outside of the house, and he actually does find the spare key under one of the potted plants on the back deck. And so he uses that, and he opens up the back door, and he goes inside. And it's quiet, and it's very, very dusty. And everything's bizarrely still. It doesn't look like anything was really touched. He goes through the kitchen, and there's nothing there. He looks into the fridge and finds that there's some food. A lot of it's gone bad. It smells really bad. Walks down the hallway, his sister's bedroom. He had one sister, and he looks in there, and everything's as it was before. A few things are missing. He looks over into his parents' bedroom. Some things are missing. Seems like the house is empty. And he has with him in his bag a shotgun that he got back when he was hiding in the tornado shelter that he carried around, and he'd managed to. He had a few more pellets left. He'd had to use it a few times. He used it once to hunt and managed to get a goose, but he wasn't very good at hunting, so he'd wasted some of the shots. So the house was empty, as far as he could tell. He looked downstairs, he looked around, he didn't find anything. He found some of the food storage, but he found that the kits that his parents had made for emergencies were gone, so he figured and hoped and prayed that he'd gotten in the car and had gotten away. Some days passed. He set up shop in the old house. Nobody around. He gets, pretty lonely. Although before the invasion, he was a bit of a recluse. So he's living in the house, and one day he looks out the window. It's morning. And he looks out and he sees a walker, one of the big two-legged machines that the Reds use, and it's stopped in the cul-de-sac. And it's just sort of sitting out there. It's not moving. And so he gets some shot into the gun, and he opens up the door and he walks out. And he's looking at it and he's wondering if what's going to happen. He's seen this kind of thing before, but he wants to be careful. So he sort of walks slowly down the driveway. He's just watching it. He's watching for signs of movement or things that he's seen before. And as he's walking, he happens to look up, and he jumps. He's startled. There's something very odd in the sky, and what's in the sky is this tower floating in the sky. Not like our towers, but like an alien tower, but he's never seen this before. He's seen the red ships. The red ships are sort of a grayish color, but they seem to have something, they're sort of bluish, as though they've got almost like bluish burn marks over them. But this tower is just straight gray, just iron sheet gray, and it's just sort of floating up there, not high enough into the clouds, so it's fairly low altitude, all things considered. It's very sort of blocky, definitely kind of alien. It looks almost like something generated from a computer, but it's clearly made out of real material, and it's just sort of hanging up there, and no real reason for it. And it's an overcast day still, so the sun is shining through the clouds, and a very gray, dim sun, and it's just sort of hanging up there with the clouds. And he looks back down and he sees the walker, and he looks up and he looks at that. He's not really sure what to make of it, so he just continues over to the walker, and he looks at it. It's not moving at all. So he's figuring that the red either abandoned it or is dead inside of it. So he actually climbs up the walker, and he uses the basketball hoop to get a high enough so he can get a grip into the joints of the legs, and he climbs up to the top, to where he assumes the cockpit is, or where he's seen the cockpit to be, and he tries to see if he can open it. And then it opens, and this red alien just sort of flops out of it and just smashes onto the ground. The walkers are probably about 11 feet. He falls 11 feet to the ground. You can hear the bones snap. And it's this great big hulking thing. It's like an ape, almost. And it looks like it's got a lot of sores on it and some boils and a deep red color. Some yellow pus is coming out of one of its arms. And it's got some scraggly hair. And it's just sort of smashed onto the ground. And he jumps, and he almost falls off of the walker and nearly breaks something. But he manages to climb down, and he looks at it, and he sees it's still breathing. And its chest is still. So he steps around it, and he gets towards where the face is. So he very carefully puts the shotgun close to it and prods it. Grabs hold of the gun. A great big red hand just snaps up, grabs hold of it. You can see the face. Now, its eyes look like it's got cataracts. In its mouth, there's some blood dripping from it. And it's got its tongue out, and it just roars at him. And grabs the gun with the other hand, and he pulls the trigger. And blows its head clean off. And then he threw up. And then he went back inside. And he woke up the next morning and looked out, and the dead alien was gone. Now, as you can imagine, that was a little bit disconcerting to Max Weber to see that the dead alien, he'd been planning on burying it just so he didn't have to look out there and see it and smell it, but it's gone. He goes back outside. He manages to eat a little bit of granola bars for breakfast that he had left. And he looks at the spot where it was, and there's no trace of it. All he sees is there's some scorch marks on the pavement, and the blood and stuff is still there, but there's no red beast. Walker's still there, and he looks up and he sees that there's the tower in the sky, and he sees that there's about 3 more of them way over on the horizon. He can't see them very well, but tiny in the distance. 2 of them, and then there's one that's somewhat closer, and they're just hovering there. He's never seen them. They're not red technology, or if they are, then they're something different. And he doesn't like this, so he goes out into the neighborhood, and he starts looking around, and he's looking around in the houses for some more food to eat, see if there's anything else good. And he finds some granola bars, some water, and while he steps out onto the street, he happens to notice some movement over to his left, and he sees some small thing go running over behind a house, and he thinks to himself, it's probably just another raccoon. So he keeps looking, and he goes into one house, and he's looking in the refrigerator, and the power's off. Everything's gone bad inside. There's some sour milk. It smells really bad. So he closes that, and he happens to glance out the window, and there's a child. It's got a mask on. And he just sort of sees the kid's eyes through this mask. The kid's eyes just sort of staring through the window at him. But the kid ducks down, and so he runs over to the window, and he can't see him. So he runs over to the back door, and he shoves it open. He runs out, and he just catches one glimpse of the kid disappear behind some of the trees. So he goes back to the house with the food and stuff, and he makes sure to lock the door, and he goes through the whole house, and he makes sure that things are secured. He makes sure that the windows, make sure they're bolted up as best he can, and he takes his sleeping bag, puts it downstairs in the basement in one of the rooms that doesn't have windows in it, and sleeps down there, and closes the door and locks it, because he's a little bit freaked out by that. He doesn't want anybody to be coming in on him. He wakes up the next day, and everything seems the same. Everything seems fine. And he's got a book with him. It's a book on, it's a book by Friedrich Nietzsche. It's The Birth of Tragedy. And it was one of the only books that he still has with him, because he was reading it for a class in college. So he still has that. So he reads some lines of that, and he likes it because Nietzsche's got a really flowery style, and he's very poetic. And he likes trying to figure out exactly what he's talking about and means. Then he goes out into the neighborhood, and he's looking around for just to stretch his legs a little bit and see maybe if he can find more to do with the kids. And he notices that the towers, there's still the one gray tower up above him, and then there's the towers over on the horizon have gotten a bit closer. He's wondering maybe he'll end up having to move because he doesn't know what those things are, and he keeps going through, but then decides he's just going to head back to the house. He's not sure if he's really comfortable out here. And as he's heading back, he happens to notice some movement over in the trees. He looks over and he thinks that he sees more of the kids running through. As he's walking, as he gets close to the house, he sees the shape of a 10-year-old over on one of the roofs. And so he just stops and he just shouts over towards them. He says, "Hey! Who are you? Why are you guys looking at me?" And the kid hops down from the roof. So he runs over to the house because he wants to know what's going on. He wants to know who this kid is. And he runs over and he happens to catch a glimpse of him going to the trees. So he runs into the trees to go chase after him. And he runs out of the trees out into one of the yards further in the neighborhood and runs across, and he sees this kid and realizes that it's not the same kid he saw before. It's a girl this time. You can see her blonde hair, and she's wearing a mask too. It's strapped around her head, and her hair is kind of flying out behind her. So he's running after her, and he's running. He runs up towards the edge of the neighborhood, and he notices that there's a few other kids running in the trees by her. He comes up to the edge of the neighborhood, and he stops, and he ducks down, and he runs back where he came, and he ducks down behind a car, and he does this because he was just frightened because he saw that what the kid was running towards was something that shouldn't be there. There's this silhouetted figure way up on the edge of the neighborhood, up at the highway where he first came in. It's this humanoid figure. It's kind of thin, standing about 8 feet tall, and sort of disproportionate. The top of the body is fine. The arms are a little bit long, almost like it has Marfan's syndrome, but the legs are way too long. And you can't actually see the individual legs. It looks like whatever the thing is wearing a dress of some kind, of really, really long one. And it's the sun starting to go down, so that you got this overcast sun that's sort of shining on the back of whatever this thing is. It's really tall and just sort of standing there, and the children all kind of run over to it. And he's ducked behind the car. He's behind one of the tires. He's got his gun ready. He doesn't want to look, but he knows that the thing might be walking towards him, that there's no way it didn't see him. And so he tries to lean his head over, not over the car, but under the car, to try to look under the car to see if he can see what's going on. He stares straight into one of the kids' masks. One of the kids is under the car, and he's staring straight at him. And the kid crawled under the car just silently, is now just kind of staring at him, and he jumps back. Man, he almost lets out a scream. He's got the gun ready, and he doesn't know what's happening, and then suddenly he realizes that the figure is way closer than it was, and it's approaching the car, and its skirt is ruffling a little bit as very long legs appear underneath it to be moving, and he can see now that the thing seems to be wrapped up in cloth completely. You can't see any face, you can't see any hair or anything. It's just this sort of humanish figure. It seems almost like a womanly figure, but wrapped up completely in cloth, and the kids have their masks strapped on and are kind of following around her, and he sees this, and he brandishes the gun, and the figure stops and just sort of stands there. And he's got the gun, and he says, "What are you?" None of them answer. He says, Fine. You just stay there. Don't you dare follow me. You just stay there." And he backs away. Begin walking backwards. He checks over his shoulder to see if any kids are behind him, and then finally he gets to the trees and begins booking it. And he books it back to the house, and he bolts the door and everything and hides in there. And he goes back down to the room where he can sleep, and he goes to bed. And he wakes up in the night because he can hear some creaking on the floor above him. And he's got a shotgun with him. And he opens up the door and he goes into the basement area. Hears the creaking stop, and he goes upstairs, looks through the kitchen. He's trying not to let himself be seen through any windows, and he looks around. He can't find anybody. He starts checking the closets and things to make sure they weren't hiding under the beds. He sees that can't see any trace that something was in there. Then he finds that one of the windows, they were able to get the window open. And he doesn't know what came in and left, but he shuts that down, and then as he's walking downstairs, he suddenly stops and ducks behind one of the walls, because he can see from the living room window, the tall figure is bending over and is looking through the window through its cloth. He can't see any eyes or face or anything, and is just sort of gazing through as though looking for someone looking for him. He just stays there trying to be quiet. He wakes up in the morning. He fell asleep lying there behind the wall. He doesn't want to leave the house. There's no way he's going to leave the house now. Keeps everything bolted up. He doesn't have a lot of food left, so he knows he's going to have to leave eventually, but he's figuring right now that he'd rather starve than go out. How's a granola bar? He tries to read, but his hands are shaking, and he can't do it. He can't focus. He can't think of anything besides the children and the weird tall thing. He looks out the window and he sees the towers are still up there. And he notices that there's a little sort of helicopter pods that occasionally will drop from the tower and will land somewhere away from the neighborhood, and then sometimes he'll see them come up out of the trees and go back up to the tower. Sometimes he'll see kids out in the cul-de-sac, and he'll see them walk out there, and once or twice he actually saw them playing tag, or playing with hoops, or jumping on the cars, and you could hear them kind of screaming just like kids do out in playgrounds. And then he'd see the tall figure kind of walking over to the side, and then it'd disappear. Sometimes he could see 2 or 3 tall figures over in the trees and walking around. Some of them had dresses, some of them had more like pants and were a bit shorter, only like 6 or 7 feet tall. And they had what looked like maybe rifles, but they were all wrapped up in cloth. And then one time that day, he was eating something, and then he tried to peer out the window. And all the kids were looking at him from the cul-de-sac, straight at his window. And there was the tall figure out in the midst of them, with the head turned straight up towards the window, and he ducks back down. He's freaked out. There's a knock at the door. He peeks over the window, and it's a tall figure. It's knocking at his door. He's standing patiently. He's not going to answer that. He just lies there. The knock again. He looks up over the window sill. Tall person is gone. Then he happens to glance over and sees that the tall person is looking up at him from over on the other side of the window, and it just walked underneath the window over to the side of the house. He's now turned and is staring straight up at him, and sees him. He ducks back down. He crawls immediately back downstairs to his bedroom and shuts the door and bolts it, and and pulls the drawer over in front of it, and he hides in the corner, and he's got his arms around his legs, and he's just breathing heavy. And he's wishing that he'd never gone off to school, because then he'd been back here with his parents, and he curses himself for ever leaving the university. Why'd he have to go? He knows why he had to go, because people were getting sick and because all the fighting was out on the west. He doesn't know why his parents would leave. Why would they leave a perfectly good house? Why did they go out? What's going on? Where's his sister? Where are the good times again? He just wishes that whatever the heck is out there will just go away. There's a knock at the door again. A knock at the door again. He can barely hear it, but it's so quiet that... Knock at the door again. He goes to sleep that way, curled up in the corner. Then he hears the phone ring. He gets up. It's in the middle of the night. He thinks to himself, no, I'm not going up there. I'm not answering it. The phone keeps ringing. Brrring, brrring. I can't do a phone noise, but it sounds pretty eerie, you know. And but he's not going up there. He's not opening up the door. He knows that if he goes up there, the phone's ringing, and he'll head up there, and he might even pick it up, go as far, and then on the other end, it'll be some strange voice, some alien voice. They'll say to them, right behind you, and then he'll turn around and it'll be there, and the cloth will open up, and there will be a circular mouth, and it'll open up, and he has no idea what'll happen next, but it's going to be terrifying and freaky. There's no way he's leaving this room. And he heads back to the corner, and he has the gun at the ready to blow the head off of whatever tries to come through that door. And the phone stops ringing, and then he hears a tap on the wall in the house behind him. He's saying, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to ignore it. I'm not answering that. And then other taps start to join it. He wakes up the next morning, opens up the door out of the basement, looks around. He walks through the basement, no one's there. He walks upstairs. He looks through the window out of the door, he doesn't see anything, and then just decides, screw it. And he opens up the door wide, and the sun comes in and rushes on his face. He walks outside. There's no one there. He doesn't see any kids, no tall people. Walks around over to the wall. He would sleep in the basement that there was tapping on last night. He sees that the wall's been sort of dented and damaged a bit. People were pounding on it hard, but he also sees that there's been painted on the wall a big circle with some symbols inside, and then the words, "Your sister." He's thinking he doesn't know what that means. You're not talking about my sister, are they? What is this? Who wrote this? Did the kids write this? And he looks out over towards the walker, and he sees a tall person, just sort of a faint image of one, over by one of the houses, just standing there. And he freaks out. He goes back into the house, shuts the door, locks it tight, goes back to the room, downstairs room, shuts the door. Just as he does, he hears a knock at the door. He opens up the door. He goes up to the front door. It's knocking. And he looks out, and it's his sister. "Big brother," she says. "Open up." He thinks to himself, "I can't open this door. This has got to be a trick. There's no way." He's thinking, he knows this has got to be a trap, and yet how can he leave his sister, someone who looks like his sister? And he realizes that this is a crazy thing about human nature, isn't it? That even if he knows it's a trap, the visual evidence is so strong that he'll do something about it. And he calls out and he says, "Prove you're my sister." She's like, "Big brother, just let me in." And he's looking out and he's like, "I can't let you in. I know you're not my sister." He's like, "What are you talking about?" He says, I can't let you in. I'm sorry." She's like, "Brother, there's tall people out here. They'll get me. The other kids will get me if you don't let me in." And he says, "I'm sorry. I know you're not my sister. I'm sorry." She just sort of looked up at the window and started to cry. But he went back down to the room and he shut the door and locked it. He heard knocking at the door rather furiously. He cried for a while. Then he decided that enough was enough. He was just really tired. He stood up and he went to the door and he opened it. He went up to the front door and he opened it up, and he didn't see anybody outside. He walked out onto the lawn and he just stood there with his gun, and he was thinking to himself he was just going to drop it on the ground and maybe just lay down in the grass, and as though to say, "Come, take me, do whatever the heck you want to do to me." But for whatever reason, he didn't actually have the guts to do that. He just couldn't let go. He thought better of it. But he stood out there for a little while. Nothing happened, and he looked up and he saw that there were still the towers there, floating in the sky. A few of them had gotten a bit closer. So he walked back to the house and went back inside and closed the door, and he went upstairs towards the living room just to look around, and he went back downstairs to his basement room and looked inside, and there was a mask lying on his sleeping bag. He got the gun ready. He looked around. He's breathing kind of hard. He's thinking they got into the house somehow while I had my back turned. I'm such an idiot. He's saying this to himself as he looks around. He looks through the bathroom. He's looking around for the kid. And he goes back upstairs towards the living room and he sees that there's another mask. It's on the chair. It wasn't there before. He hears something giggle. Here's a snicker and then a door slam in the background. He turns around. He steps through the kitchen. Around, he doesn't see anybody. And then he's walking down the hallway and he looks into one of the bedrooms and he sees another mask is lying in his sister's bedroom. He looks over towards his old room. He kicks open the door slowly, and there's a tall person in there. He has to bend low because the ceiling is too low. He's just kind of standing in there holding some of his old books, drops them when the door opens, turns over at him. He freezes. He's got his gun ready, but he can't fire it, and he just stares at the thing and starts moving towards him, and he just backs away. He doesn't know why he can't quite fire it. It's not like anything's in his head telling him not to. He just doesn't want to. He kind of remembers the red thing that he blew its head off and he threw up. For whatever reason, he just can't, and the thing's moving towards him, and he hears the kids in his parents' bedroom, and some of them shuffle out of a bathroom, and he doesn't know how they were hiding. Maybe they're hiding in the walls or something, but this tall person is just kind of walking down, sort of unsteadily down the hallway towards him, and he's just stumbling back, and suddenly, bam! He fires the gun, smacks right into the tall thing, and it falls down on its knees under the dress and collapses on the floor a bit and starts to convulse a little bit, and the children scatter. He doesn't know where they go. They just sort of hide. He's just standing there with the gun watching red blood start to pool out on the floor. So he approaches, and her hands reach up towards the gauze that's around the face, and before he really knows what he's doing, he starts unwrapping it. He starts pulling the gauze off, and he finds there's hair under there. And he starts pulling off the gauze around the face and getting rid of it, and he finds that there's this very humanoid face under there. It's an extraordinarily gaunt face. Very, very pale. Hardly any nose. There's just sort of two sort of slits for a nose. The eyes are way too big, it seems like. Almond-shaped, very wide, but they're blue. They have a very bluish iris. She's very bony, very long face, and sort of matches the body. And all in all, it's very alien, but also very human. It's sort of an uncanny appearance. And she looks up at him, and he figures it's a she. That's just how he perceives her for now. And she's just sort of staring up at him and starts to cough up some black stuff, and looks very much in pain, and says, "Please